Welcome to our Cyber Liability Seminar. It's, I think, the second of our Breakfast Club series of 6 webinars that we're doing here at Nulty Insurance. Really glad you could join us today. I'll start out by just introducing our panel. So I am Tom Jager. I'm the Commercial Lines Team Leader here at Nulty Insurance. I'm going to be joined in the first half of the webinar by Chad Bonner, one of my coworkers here at Nulty in the Commercial Lines Department. The second half of the seminar will be Michael Stengel, another coworker in commercial lines, and he'll be interviewing Justin Hatfield of HECO about a claims experience that HECO had at their company. So that's kind of the setup of what we're going to be doing. There will be, good news, if you stay through this, somebody will win a breakfast from Nulty. So there'll be a drawing at the end of the seminar for the winner of that. Please ask questions in the Q&A box. Ask anytime. We will, if we don't answer them during the actual presentation, we'll try and catch them at the end of the program. If we don't know the answer, we will get back to you with the answers later on. So there we go. There's our setup. And Chad is here with me.
Good morning, Tom.
Morning, Chad.
Are you going to share with the audience what we're going to cover in the presentation?
Yeah, good. Yeah, so it is a cyber liability. I hope that's what you intended to sign up for, because that's what you're getting. We're going to kind of do an overview. Oh, I love the scary guy. We're going to kind of do an overview of the cyber liability market and insurance policies, what you should probably look for, the biggest coverage items that you should look for in a cyber liability policy. We're going to talk about some of the most common claims that we're seeing right now and current happenings in the cyber liability market, changes that are going on. And then, as we said, we're going to review an actual claim with Justin and Michael later on in the presentation.
So with a lot of my clients, I've noticed that there are a lot of changes in the market. What are you seeing out there right now, Tom?
Yeah, we definitely are seeing that. Hey, I love this slide because it was from 2 years ago. Chad and I did a presentation on cyber liability. And some of the things are the same, but some of the things have changed quite a bit from this time. The risk is still there. In fact, the risk is enhanced. We're seeing more and more claims for cyber liability, more and more in the cyber crime area, ransomware area. That's increased greatly over the last couple of years. The cheap part, that's probably not true anymore. I'll call it affordable for most situations, but not cheap anymore. We've seen rapid increase in rates and restrictions in coverage due to losses. Some of our clients are seeing 50 to 100% increases from their current provider. So very aggressive increases. And at the same time, they're taking those big increases and then reducing the amount of coverage that's available to them. That's the bad news side. On the good news side, there are new players that are coming into the marketplace that are offering some innovation and opportunities to keep the coverage affordable at this time.
So that's one of the hurdles that I often struggle with when comparing different forms. They seem like they vary greatly. Can you tell us a little bit about that, Tom?
Yeah, they're absolutely, Chad, absolutely not uniform. If we go to a property policy, they're pretty much uniform. The coverage from carrier A to carrier B is not very different. In fact, oftentimes it's the exact same coverage form. With cyber liability, there is no common form. Every form is unique. Every carrier provides a unique form. So it's a lot harder to compare coverage from carrier A to B to C and so on. That makes it a trickier situation from our standpoint, and we have to be alert to what coverages are in and not in a certain policy. On the good news side, underwriters continue to be willing to write full prior acts. What that means is, let's say you buy a policy today. You sign up today. This is the first cyber liability policy you ever have. 2 months from now, you find out that you were actually breached back in February of 2020 or 2021, whatever. That claim, since you did not know about it at the time you signed up, will be covered, even though the breach actually occurred before the policy was put into place. We continue to see the Lloyd's of London market as the broadest and most innovative in terms of coverage. They tend to offer the best terms and the best pricing. We do have U.S. domiciled companies such as Travelers, Chubb, CNA, and so forth that are offering good coverage, just in general not as broad as what we can get from Lloyd's of London, and pricing tends to be a little bit higher than Lloyd's of London. Chad, did you have a question?
Yeah, I do. On that point, Tom, do you ever have any apprehensions on going with a Lloyd's of London market, just because it's maybe not a familiar name that you've heard of in the past? And second part of that question, there's a lot of policies out there that have cyber just included in them. How do you feel about those, comparing them to policies that you would get from Lloyd's of London?
Yeah, good questions. A couple of things there. One, I don't have any apprehensions about using Lloyd's of London. They're financially very strong, all the parts of it. So as I mentioned on the screen there, Lloyd's is not one monolith. It's 80 plus syndicates that are within the Lloyd's family. So they compete against U.S. domiciled companies, but they also compete against each other. So you'll have your CFC competing against your Beasley. Both of those are Lloyd's carriers, but they'll compete against each other. The carriers that provide with your normal package policy, which in our world is your property and liability, those carriers that throw a cyber policy in there, I call it Cyber Light. We're going to address that a little bit more about what they include in there, but generally it's not much. Let me put it this way. If you're paying $150 to have a cyber policy included in your package policy, you're getting $150 worth of cyber. You're not getting real cyber coverage. It's a false sense of security.
All right. So how about go into the form and what it actually covers?
That's an excellent question. So we're using a CFC coverage form here. Our way of looking at things, CFC still remains the strongest, broadest coverage form available on the marketplace. There are other competitive programs out there that are really good as well. CFC is just the best. Doesn't mean it's the best for every circumstance, because sometimes they're priced just not competitive. But definition of cyber event right here: any actual or suspected unauthorized system access, electronic attack, denial of service attack, cyber terrorism, hacking, Trojan horse, phishing, and so forth. What I like about here is it's any actual or suspected. Sometimes we don't know if we've actually encountered a cyber event. I've turned in claims for suspected that didn't turn out to be actual cyber losses, but they were still paid for because they were suspected. Our client had reason to suspect that they were a victim of a cyber attack, and we turned in the claim and had it successfully covered. Keep in mind, the coverage, the cyber event is what always triggers the coverage. So the definition essentially lays the foundation for what's covered later on in the policy.
So speaking of later in the policy, here are some of the definitions that I thought would be important for you to review.
Yeah. I like this. I like starting off right here because of the cyber policy. Any cyber policy you get, you may want to make sure you got legal coverage included in there, regulatory costs. Legal is a big part of this. If you're a victim of a cyber event, you may not know when it starts, when it ends, and what to do in the middle. You're going to need some legal help. You probably have a corporate attorney. I'm going to tell you they're not an expert in all likelihood on cyber losses. So the insurance company is going to hire someone that is an expert that will help you with the loss, determining what the loss is and what your obligations are as a business to respond to that loss. Second one, the forensics costs can be huge. Determining what the source of the problem was and the extent of the problem so that you can properly respond is a huge thing and a very expensive thing. Very important part of that. Chad, you're skipping ahead on me here.
Sorry.
That's okay. The third-party breach management, just failure to protect data that you have, that or causing others to not be able to protect the data that they have. All of those things are your responsibility. You have specific obligations. And again, the insurance company will be able to tell you what those are. The fourth one there is ransomware or extortion. Huge part of this coverage, because we're seeing this as a very active area. Continues to be a huge source of losses. And excuse me, I will say this. I've never once had a customer that I've talked to about the possibility of ransomware saying to me, oh yeah, we're susceptible to this. Every customer, prospect, client that I've ever talked to says, nope, we've got it locked down. Don't worry about us. And yet it happens to large businesses, government entities, and small businesses all across the United States and right here in West Michigan.
I'm actually interested to hear from Justin on later in the presentation on what he feels is maybe the most valuable part of the policy and maybe what helped HECO out the most.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the next part is cybercrime. And with my clients, I've noticed quite a bit of change in this market. We talked about increasing costs. We've also, at least with my clients, seen a reduction in coverage in the crime area because it seems to be a kind of a frequently used part of the policy. What are you seeing in that area?
Yeah, absolutely the same thing, Chad. I just had a renewal come through where the underwriter happened to be the carrier was a cent on this one. They essentially doubled the price. And okay, that's one thing. And then they didn't even mention, but they had pulled out all the cyber crime coverage completely. And then they had a little note that said, if you want to buy it back, you can, but it's going to cost you extra. Just really, really tough situation. Now, we were able to find coverage elsewhere that included all the cybercrime. Cybercrime is where we're seeing most activity in claims right now. Funds transfer and computer fraud are some. Funds transfer is outside of the organization, reaching in and causing your bank to make a transaction. Computer fraud is inside the organization, directing your bank falsely to make a transfer of money. Those happen, but by far the biggest one that we're seeing right now of any claim is push payment or social engineering fraud. Essentially convincing you as a business, your employees, to make voluntary payments to what they think are customers or providers or suppliers or something like that, when in fact they aren't. They're being transferred to a third party who's a cyber criminal, essentially. This kind of coverage is essential right now. We're seeing, because of the proliferation of losses, we're seeing that the coverage is being restricted. A lot of the U.S. carriers are providing at max $50,000 of coverage here, and they're often putting a $10,000 deductible on this coverage. One other quick note on cyber crime. If you have a full-fledged crime policy with a carrier, they're probably including these coverage as well. You want to make sure you coordinate with your cyber liability policy. Generally, I'm seeing cyber liability provide better limits and better terms for this coverage than the cyber crime carriers are providing right now.
So the next section of the policy, I don't feel like is utilized quite as much. Tom, I don't know what your experience has been like with business interruption, but it can also be a valuable part to at least review with your cyber policy.
Yeah, a couple things on this screen. You're right, Chad. Loss of income is included after a cyber event. I haven't had a lot of claims on these, but I have had claims on these. One of them was a contractor that we insure. They were a victim of ransomware at exactly the time they were going to bid several jobs. They were not able to produce the bids and therefore weren't able to win any of that work. after extensive discussions with the insurance company, we finally came to a settlement based on the idea that they would have won at least a few of those jobs that they weren't able to bid and lost the income as a result of that. So it does happen. It's not terribly common. The other ones you can see too is they'll replace your hardware. If it's damaged as a result of a cyber loss, they'll replace your data that's lost after a cyber event. I even tried to make a claim once for reputational harm that our customer was lost reputation in the market as a result of the loss. My claim I was not successful at, but I know there are some that do happen, especially if you're a retailer, restaurant, something like that, and people don't trust your credit cards to be working anymore. This could be a source of a claim.
So this is kind of a recap, Tom, but I think it would be a good summary just to kind of bring it back all together.
Yeah. So this is what we're seeing in the cyber market right now, which is aggressive premium increases from some of the markets. And at the same time, they're reducing terms, they're reducing coverage, they're reducing, especially in the cyber crime coverage area. They're increasing their deductibles. And it's causing a disruption in this marketplace for sure. At the same time, we are seeing new players in the market. Some of the new carriers are saying, hey, we think the prices are getting to a point where we want to be part of this. And we think we can structure the coverage and target the clients that we want so that we can reasonably be in a place to make money. We talked a little bit about that cyber light coverage. It truly does give us a false sense of security. It just is not a good coverage. Again, if you're paying $150 and somebody says you're getting a cyber policy, you're not getting much of a cyber policy for that. Chad, let's turn the tables on you. Any ideas on factors that impact pricing and terms out there in the marketplace?
Yeah, so this is everyone's favorite part of the cyber policy is doing the cyber applications in the beginning of the policy term. And those policy or applications can vary greatly. So it could be a 1-page to a 10-page application. And I know many of our clients go through that. So when we're looking at those applications, some of the questions that they're asking, protections that they're looking for, the firewalls and antivirus, make sure that we're doing encryption. The multi-factor authentication is a must now. A lot of cyber companies are not writing coverage on individual businesses if they're not using multi-factor authentication. And there's some other resources out there from your cyber liability companies. So if you're using these Lloyd companies, a lot of them have built-in training for your employees where they can do different phishing simulations, and you actually get a discount for going through that training. The other one that I would add to this, and I've seen a number of companies start to add, is a written disaster plan, both for something that would happen as an act of God or a massive breach situation. These cyber companies want to make sure that you have a plan in place and you know what to do when the time comes, unfortunately, if you have a breach. So that's something also to consider. We have a few resources at Nulty Insurance to help assist with that. So feel free to contact your agent if you have any questions in that area.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
Let me just add quick to that, Chad. I think a lot of us are working virtually these days. I think that lends itself to more of the scams that are going on out there. The people that are trying to steal from you are very good. They're really good at what they do. They've practiced it. They've made it. This is their profession. It really is. And they will try and trick your employees. You've got to continually train your employees to make sure that they avoid this. Never, ever change banking information for one of your suppliers based on an email. I don't care how good that email looks. It might be brilliant. It might be literally in the middle of a string of emails with your known contact on them. If they send it to you, you call and verify.
I think that's well said. We've all seen a lot of claims in that area. So with that said, let's send it over to Michael and Justin. So Justin can share some of his experience on a recent claim that he's had.
Thank you, guys, and good morning, everybody. Want to say thank you to Justin for giving us some of his time to explain exactly what happened to HECO about a year and a half ago. He was given the pleasure of dealing with a cyber breach. And we thought that it would be nice for you guys to hear kind of his experience. Justin is the president of HECO. He's the third generation leadership of the company that his grandfather started, I believe, back in the 50s. Justin, can you give just a brief description of what HECO does?
Yeah, so HECO's, we service industrial companies in their electric motor powertrains, from electric motor repair, selling, distributing new electric motors, monitoring those with our predictive group, as well as managing the components of that system through warehouses and things like that. Kind of focused primarily in the Midwest.
Thank you. Let's rewind. November 22nd of 2019. Can you tell us how your day started?
Yeah, it was a great day. Let me just tell you that. Just top tier day of what I had. But so I got to the office about my normal time, about 6:45, and I sat on my computer, typed in my password, and I couldn't log in. Nothing would work, and it was odd. And so I texted our IT manager at the time and said, "Hey, I'm having issues logging in." And about within a minute or two, my phone rang, and he goes, "We have a major issue. I got to get in there and see, but I can't get to anything." And that was kind of the first indication of something happened.
So how did you respond?
So I kind of sat there and just said, "Okay, we'll see what happens." And he comes in. Within a couple minutes of him coming in, he kind of said, "Hey, I think we've been hacked. I think we have an issue, and it's above me." Was what he said. We need some help. So I had some contacts at some local IT firms that we had partnered with on some other stuff. So I reached out to them and said, "Hey, do you have anyone that can come in and help us figure this out?" And they responded pretty quickly and had somebody here within, I think, an hour, till we were able to dig in and actually see that, yep, for sure, we were attacked.
And at that point, you, of course, thought of cyber insurance, correct?
Yeah, luckily, we had a client that, as part of our contract and our terms and conditions with them, said that we had to have cyber coverage. So, through a bunch of negotiating with them and stuff, we actually, ended up getting it because of that specific client, which was a blessing in disguise at that time.
I recall getting a phone call from you guys. At that time, we contacted CFC, was your carrier. We contacted CFC, and what did they do initially?
Yeah, so I'll back up just a little bit before we go into that, kind of maybe to get the whole picture. We as soon as we got into our actual server, when those other guys got involved, we identified that it was indeed a ransomware attack. So what they did is they encrypted all of our files on our servers, our emails, everything. And it ended up being, and then there's a message on there that said, "Hey, you've been encrypted. Please email this for payment terms to get your information back." So we found all that. And then at that point is when we said, "Okay, how do we do this? We have cyber coverage." And that's when I called Michael, and we went to CFC Lloyd's, who was our carrier, and they connected us with initially their response group, which handles these, I think, situations. And they ended up connecting with us with a company in Texas called Solace Security, that ended up handling kind of the whole situation for us. They kind of guided us, down every little path of how to proceed, because, how do you talk to these people? How do you negotiate with them? How do you email with them? Like, is it even worth the time, or is it over? Like, we didn't have a clue how to respond. We're an industrial service company. We're not involved in this stuff. So they kind of, this company and CFC's response really guided us on how to proceed, which I was extremely thankful for.
And through their guidance, there were obviously numerous conversations, and you were speaking with people in Texas, and then also people over in Britain, correct?
Yeah. So that was the initial call, was with the people over in the UK, and then they hooked us up with other people that ended up leading to those people in Texas.
Perfect. And their guidance was to pay the ransom, or what did they say to do at that point?
Yeah, so they initially took over everything, and it was funny because I thought it was odd. They started to negotiate with the hacker, and I thought that was kind of odd, that they're negotiating with him. I would have never done that, but and they said, hey, you're covered, so we'll handle it, and our big goal is to get your data back. So we had to do a bunch of stuff initially, like kick them out of our system and run a bunch of scanning things to like make sure that they were out, so they couldn't just continue to do it over and over again, even if we paid them. So then they said, they took over negotiation, and they ultimately negotiated. I think they requested $50,000 initially, and they ended up negotiating it down to like, I don't know, $40,000 or something, which was paid in Bitcoin as well, is what they wanted to be paid in.
So how were you able to pay in Bitcoins?
So that same company we were dealing with in Texas hooked us up with another company that we would issue a payment to. So I had to wire the money to this company, and then they would make it into Bitcoin and submit it to the hacker with all the tracking and knowing like it actually went through and all this stuff. So it was actually kind of, it's funny looking backwards now, because it was, this was on Friday. So we actually made the payment by the end of the day on Friday. That's how quick they were able to respond and help us. So it was like our bank's cutoff, I think, is 4:00 p.m. for wires. And I showed up at like 4:05. And I'm sitting there talking, and they had to get a VP down to work with me. And they're like, no, you need to wire this to this company that's then doing this. Like, explaining the purpose of the wire was pretty difficult. They actually looked at me at one point and said, like, is your kid kidnapped? Like they were like paranoid for a lot of different things. But I'm like, no, this is real. Like, we have to do this. And I wanted to get it on that Friday, because if not, I would have had to wait till Monday, and we would have lost the whole weekend then trying to recover some of our data.
Once that ransom was paid, were you guys in the clear? Were there still issues?
It took, because they ended up encrypting, I think 11 devices were actually encrypted. So that was all of our servers, our backup servers. And that was the problem, was they actually got to our backups. And I didn't realize the impact of having our backups. I thought we were so well backed up and no one could ever get to it and all this stuff. And they got to our backups, which wouldn't allow us to just, normally if your backups are saved, you can just restore your system and everything's back. But they got to our backups and even encrypted those. So I would say we got 90%, 95% of our stuff back. So once they encrypt it, they end up giving you a decryption tool that you have to run. And what happens is sometimes with that decryption tool, it corrupts the data, because I think it's stressful on those files to try to do all this. But 95% of our data come back. We did lose stuff, but compared to what we were at with losing everything, it was great. I was very thankful at that point.
So from start to finish, from that morning, 7 a.m. on the 22nd of November, until when were you back to normal, full operation?
So by the end of Friday, we had decided to switch our emails so that we could at least send and get new emails. We didn't have any of our history because those were still encrypted. So we switched our emails, switched to Microsoft 365, and at least our new emails were coming in and we could send emails. Emails were the hardest thing to get back. Those are huge files, 20 years of emails for people. It took a long time to decrypt. And I think we were it was a couple of weeks later that some people finally got all of their emails back where they could go back and reference them. Our server was back up probably within a week and a half. But it was just one thing after another. It was an extremely slow process, because not only we had to back up all of the encrypted files, because we knew that there would be corruption that happens when you decrypt them. So we backed up all that, then we restored them, then we backed them up again. So it was just an extremely long process of trying to prepare for the worst case of something happening again throughout the decryption process.
Yeah. We, Chad and Tom talked earlier a little bit on, we often, when we're talking with our clients, there's hesitation or pushback when it comes to cyber insurance, because Many companies feel that they have the greatest IT person on staff, or they hired the greatest third-party IT company the world has ever seen, or they've got everything backed up and they are basically bulletproof. How did you feel that HECO was susceptible to something like this prior to the event? Or I know you mentioned earlier you basically bought it because of a contract with one of your customers.
Yeah, no, I didn't think we were just. I thought there was a chance it could happen, but I thought our backups would, kick in and we'd be fine. I thought, oh, we do the right backups. We have, nightly backups and weekly backups and all these different, backups we do. That, hey, if we do get attacked or something, we just restore our backups and we're good. So I didn't think this could happen to us at all, and I was wrong. It takes one person to do, and that's what happened. Is we had one computer go bad. And that was our remote desktop computer. So our IT guy would that would be the safe path for people to get in. That computer died. So he opened a port in our network for someone that's a remote employee to get in to access our server and our files. And that's where they got in through that specific port. So something I didn't even know happened. I didn't even know, I think the next week we were planning on putting in place the replacement system there. And it happened in that one time frame where they got, and then they ended up getting into an admin account somehow. And once they got the admin account, they got to everything. And that was really the ultimate problem. But it takes one person clicking a dumb link or doing something for them to get access. And they could even be in there and you don't even know. So I think at one point they did a whole forensic analysis afterwards, CFC did. And we identified that we think they were in for like a day before. That they were just kind of hanging around watching and ready to strike and ready to make their move. They're like a cheetah ready to pounce on something. Like they were just waiting.
We cyber has often been associated with, we've heard Russia, China, North Korea. Did they have any idea where maybe this breach was coming from?
Yeah, they called it a ransomware variant. That's a Dharma. That's like the group that does these. But they tracked it all over the place. And I think they decided it was either the Middle East or China. But they didn't know because they just bounced up. They tracked it going from, server to server to server all over the place. But they hid themselves extremely well. It felt like I was watching an episode of some government show where these people are hacking and going all over the place. They're rerouted through all these different servers and stuff. I don't understand it. But no, they ultimately couldn't figure out where they were. But they knew it was foreign of some kind. It definitely wasn't U.S.
based. We mentioned a $40,000 ransom. I believe that was paid, or somewhere around 40,000. Was that the only expense that occurred, or were there other expenses because of this breach? Did you have equipment that was damaged, or any other expenses?
Yeah, we had equipment that was extremely damaged that wouldn't even come up. So I think we found one like a week or two afterwards because we couldn't even turn on this computer anymore. That we found out it was encrypted. Luckily, we had all of our backups at that point, so it didn't matter. We could just wipe it. But we had equipment that we replaced that we threw away. We ended up not using our servers. We used it for about a month or two, and then we never used our servers again. We ended up saying, I don't trust those. I don't want anything to do with those, even though we wiped them. But we had all sorts of equipment issue, but we had the response issues because if you remember in the beginning, I said I called in that external IT firm. That was all covered. The fact that, hey, we needed help, we needed resources, but our conference room became a war zone. We had all the different computers and servers set up in there with all these different screens and everybody decrypting this and backing up this, and it was a crazy couple of weeks. But no, the only thing I would say they didn't really pay for was our time. They didn't pay for our time as part of the response, but they covered all of our external costs that were related to it, including that vendor that we called in that they didn't approve or anything. They knew that we had to respond, and they took care of that without a fight. Didn't argue at all on that one. So.
It's obviously very clear that it was a blessing in disguise that you purchased that cyber insurance. Outside of that, what did you learn, and what can others learn from your unfortunate situation?
Don't assume you know what you're doing. There's people out there that know what they're doing, don't put it all on one person. I mean, if you have one IT person, I would be using an outside firm to do an assessment or look at what your threats are. We had weak password policies. We didn't change them enough. We had everything in one place. And that's one thing we did is we had, our Exchange server for emails, our file server, even our old ERP system, which we operate the company on. Thank goodness we had switched to a cloud-based ERP system because we never got that back. We had a cloud, but there were so many weird files as part of that system that it never came back, which was fine because we weren't using it anymore. It was only there for reference. But so now our ERP's in the cloud, hosted one place. Our emails are hosted through Microsoft, and we even moved our servers to cloud hosted at a server farm with all the proper backups and all those things in place because they're professionals. That's what they do. And, we changed everything. We're not doing anything the same way we were when we were we're actually talking right now about putting our server back in place only for archive data, just to save money from what we're hosting in the cloud. To say, hey, we'll just put it here for some of the stuff you'll need to get to, once every year or something. But yeah, everything changed and deal with the experts. Let them handle your stuff. Do what you do. Don't, unless you're a hacker and you know how this stuff works, don't pretend you do.
Yeah. I hope everybody can kind of, understand that, aside from obviously the cost, the expense that, the ransom payment, the damage to the computers and servers. I think the fact that CFC or the cyber insurance provider handles and mitigates this claim is just so valuable. You almost can't put a price on that. So, Justin, I thank you so much for sharing this experience with everybody. I think it's a very valuable lesson. Hopefully, others don't experience such a situation, but that is why cyber insurance is available. So again, thank you so much. I'll turn this back over to Chad, I believe, at this time. Thank you, everybody, for attending this morning.
Yeah, thank you, Justin. It was really well said. There was a couple of questions in the Q&A. I'm going to ask Tom one of them. From your friend, Ben Ipama. He wants to know if there's some kind of coverage and comparison cheat sheet that can be used to compare companies. What do you think about that, Tom?
I don't think that there is one that can do it perfectly. We do that internally. And actually, we just started working with a program that allows us to do that more efficiently with 5 to 7 companies at once. Not perfect, but it is a good thing, a good tool for us to use. It doesn't deep dive into all the definitions, and that's where it would just take hours and hours and hours. But it gives us the basic coverages and allows us to do a 20,000 foot overview of those coverages and of those 5 to 7 companies. And it works for most of our clients, not all of them, but most of our clients. It's a really good tool.
So the second question comes from Julie Calloway, and I'll answer this one. And she just wants to know who's a target for cyber insurance. And it's such a tough question to answer because I feel like everyone's a target. Hackers no longer are just targeting Fortune 500 companies with tons of personal health information or personal identifiable information. They're looking at landscape companies with 20 employees. They're looking at, a manufacturer like HECO. They're looking at any company in Southwest Michigan, throughout Michigan, the Midwest in the United States. I think anyone could be susceptible to a cyber claim. And really, I think what they're doing is targeting people that don't have the robust IT systems that these Fortune 500 companies do. So I really believe that anyone can be a target for this.
Hey, Chad, one thing that when we were going through our experience, they realized that they weren't out to get personal information. We don't have a bunch of social security numbers or banking information or any of that stuff on our server. Our server was pictures of the jobs we work on. That has no value to them. They were in it for the money. They were in it for the ransomware. So if they can find someone where the data means something to you, then you're susceptible, right? It doesn't mean that it has any value to anyone else out there.
I think
so
that's perfect.
That was a big thing. And that was actually part of the forensics afterwards was what And there would have been, Tom mentioned the legal implications later. We didn't have to deal with any of that because we don't have credit card information or social security numbers or anything. But if we did, I think this would have gone on a lot longer and been a lot more complicated. So we were lucky just by the nature of our business that we didn't have that stuff.
Just one more on that, Chad. Just always remember, the cyber criminals are in this to make money. And the fastest way to make money is to hold people for ransom, like they did with HECO, or to convince you to send your money to them voluntarily, which we see in social engineering. Grabbing personal identifiable information is great, but the time it takes to turn that into money for the cyber criminal takes time. They can put it on the dark web, they can sell it. It just doesn't come as quickly as someone sending them $40,000 worth of Bitcoin.
Yeah, I think that's well said. And I think we're at the conclusion time for the seminar. Tom, do you want to draw a number between 1 and 43 for our breakfast gift certificate?
I love the number about halfway through there, 22, let's go with.
All right, 22 is Mindy Carr. So Mindy Carr, we will be getting you your gift certificate to a local restaurant in the Southwest Michigan area. So thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you, Justin, for all of your insight on your claim and sharing all of that information. Hopefully everyone found this valuable. And if anyone has any questions, feel free to contact your agent at Nulty Insurance, and we'd be happy to help you.
Thank
Have
you.
a great day.
Thanks, everybody.